One, two, one, two. Everybody, could you please grab your cuppa and come down to the front of the church. It seems that the sound is better directly down here in the front of the nave. Please bring your papers. There are copies of the agenda which are on the table at the side. If you don't, even if you have your papers from last time, please grab a copy of the agenda because it is slightly different. It's not just filling in the pieces from last time that we didn't get to. So, yeah, that's it then. That's fine. I'm aware that there are some people who are needing to go early, so I'm going to start in 1 minute with the prayer which we say together. Please remember there are copies of the agenda over on the table where Amanda is, and that will help because also the prayer that we're going to say together is on that agenda. As people want to speak, it'd be good to pass around the microphone. Welcome to this special meeting of the parish. We join together in the prayer which is on the front of the agenda. Gracious and loving God, our lives are in your hands. Our past, present and future belong to you. Bless us with vision so that we may see clearly. Bless us with compassion for one another and for all whom you love. Bless us with faithfulness that we may seek your will always. Bless us with wisdom so that we may seek to understand. Bless us with love so that the focus of our lives will be outside of ourselves. Grant us the patience and the courage to embrace change as we seek your future together. Amen. There is a board which is circulating around, a place to be able to record attendance, and if there are apologies of which you are aware, then please make a note of those there also. Thank you. On that sheet. As I said at the end of the service, there is the record of electors, which is on the side, and if you have not yet checked that you're on that list. If you were on the list last time for our meeting 3 weeks ago, then you will be there. If you weren't here or hadn't checked that, then please do, because those who are on that roll are those people who are eligible to vote. There are also a few extra copies of the vision document which Amanda has at the side. That's one of the documents that we will be looking at today the others were in the papers which were circulated for the annual meeting. I want to begin with taking the opportunity for a brief safety briefing. Annually, we have a safety update from the diocese, and one of the things that they suggest is that there is an annual safety briefing. So I'll do it here at this meeting, and some things to think about when we are in other places. It's important to be aware of what to do should there be something that happens. Who knows where the fire extinguishers are here? Where is the nearest fire extinguisher? Across there? Oh, is there one? There's one around there. I can see one at the back. One over my right shoulder. There are a few around in the building for an immediate response, but of course we know that you don't put yourself in danger by going to respond. It's only if you are safe and other people are safe. Following that, the name, it used to be DRAB-C, and now it's a whole lot of letters of the alphabet of different things to do. But you recognise a danger, respond appropriately, ensure that people are safe and evacuating. Where is the evacuation point if you're clearing out of here? Jennifer, it's out the other side there, underneath the palm trees. A clear, open space so that if people need to evacuate from the building, they go back to there. Just a couple of things that we may and hopefully never will actually have to know enough to be able to enact, but it's always important to know. It's good for those who either visit or regularly worship at other centres and other buildings, including our parish centre, to know where those things are, where the emergency response resources are, including fire extinguisher should that be what the emergency is. But also there is a first aid kit which is in the parish office, and there is another one I think which is down at the back in the kitchen area here. That's another emergency to which we often need to have a response. As a place where sometimes some dangerous chemicals are kept, there is a register that is kept of hazardous chemicals that are in the place, and it's important that that continues to be maintained. If you see anything that is a spill or a danger that seems to have arisen, chemical, electrical, all sorts of different things, it's good to be able to give feedback about that through the parish office, to one of the wardens, to me, to somebody who is even on parish council if you can't find any of those, to let us know if there is something you are aware of which is a hazard. We also are aware that there are other sorts of hazards which people might encounter, and other aspects of safety, and that includes personal safety. So we still have our old signs on the back of the church wall for those people who are the people to whom you can then speak if there is something where either you feel unsafe or you recognise that somebody else is in a position where they are unsafe. And they will be renewed, and they'll actually have the title of safeguarders. It's not just about aspects of relating with children, but also of anybody who is vulnerable in our community, that we take care of one another and that we're then responding to that. If you can't find one of those safeguarders, then obviously to me or to one of the wardens is another way of being able to respond to those situations. From time to time, we will be reminding people of these things. It was even suggested that we should have a fire drill. I'm not going to do that. Or not today, anyway. Perhaps at Pentecost. The next item. On the back of the original documents for the annual meeting were the 10 commitments for preventing and responding to domestic and family violence. It's something that came out in the middle of last year in response to a report which had been written which recognised that the levels of domestic and family violence which we see in the community around us are equally, and in some places it suggested even higher, within church communities. We need to be aware of that and to be responding to that. A variety of ways in which, as the parish council decided that we would respond. One is to affirm those statements, and I will ask us in a moment, I'll read them out for people who don't have them, but to ask us to affirm those as some commitments for preventing and responding to domestic and family violence. We are also preparing a public statement to say that we are a place which is open to responding and caring for people who are experiencing that sort of violence and distress and abuse. On the 10th of April, we will be blessing a red bench, which will be out here in the gardens alongside St Luke's, a public statement that we are a place where people can come there for a time of peace, and also to be able to come to and through us to be able to find assistance and find a positive and helpful and hopeful response if that is what they're going through. As I suspect that a number of people don't have those statements in front, I will read them out. Our church acknowledges and laments the violence which has been suffered by some of our members and repents of the part we have played in allowing an environment where violence went unaddressed. Our church leaders commit to ensure conditions that support the prevention of violence, a church culture that promotes equality and support for those who experience violence. Our church consistently teaches about equality, freedom from violence, respectful relationships, and the honour and value of every person. Our church affirms that human relationships are to be based on respect and mutuality. Our church acknowledges the different experiences of all people and that these have played a part in whether they have been treated with respect and equality. Our church actions are directed by the gospel of love, peace and justice, and are informed and engaged with local, state and national government initiatives as appropriate. Our church supports cultural change in our communities by communicating effectively to our members. Our church trains our leaders, pastoral staff and parish councils to understand and be equipped to respond in ways that prevent and address domestic and family violence. Our leaders and pastoral staff hold themselves to account and are guided by the Anglican Church's Code of Conduct, Faithfulness in Service. And the last is a commitment that these commitments are regularly reviewed and improved. Sometimes there are statements that are made which just then sit and gather dust. But the last is a commitment that we will continue to attend to, observe, review, and engage with those commitments. Is there anything that anybody wanted to say in response or questions that arise out of those? And if you do, then please put up your hand or come forward to so that we use the microphone when we're speaking so that everybody is able to hear. Anything that anybody wanted to add as either a response or a question to those commitments? There is a motion which is on the agenda that this special meeting of the parish of St Luke's, Toowoomba, accepts and affirms the 10 commitments for preventing and responding to domestic and family violence. Is there somebody who would be wanting to move that motion? Moved and seconded with enthusiasm immediately by Viv and Peter. There were a number of other hands that went up. They just both got in independently immediately. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Election of parish wardens. I have 2 nominations which I have received. Are there any others that people wanted to move from the floor of the meeting? Those two nominations are Catherine Silk and John Compton. For John, should he be elected, we will need to apply to the regional bishop for permission, because he's just a tad over the age limitation which was set in the age limitation canon. I'm hopeful, in fact I've already written the letter. You would probably be embarrassed if you read it, John, because I wax lyrical about the many things that you do and have to offer us in parish community. So it is, and John has made very clear that this is for continuity and stability in the parish, and it is for 12 months. So when we get to next year's AGM, we will certainly need one person standing up as a parish warden looking forward. Any discussion or responses or comments about that? We did decide at our last meeting that we would have 2 parish wardens, and so now we have two nominations. Can I have a motion then that Catherine Silk and John Compton be elected to the position of parish warden? Thank you, David, and seconded by Gary. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, and thank you. Now, not everybody will know both of you immediately. Could I ask you both to stand up and so we can recognise? And congratulations. In the document that was circulated for the annual meeting, there was a final report from our 2020 vision, which was something that we decided in 2017 and then looked forward over those 2018, beginning of 2018, and looked forward over those years. What we did there was Parish Council kept that vision before us, and it guided the way in which we shaped our Parish Council meetings, the pattern of our agenda, the things that we kept coming back to remind ourselves of what it is that we had decided together that we were going to be looking at. And that is what we will continue to do with a renewed vision. For those things at the end of that time, when we were starting the process of looking at a new pattern of vision, we looked at what had happened and what we had learned as we explored those particular things. That's an important thing, I think, to do, to be able to look back and to say, we said we were going to focus on this, go in this direction, explore these things. So what did we learn? For some of the things we learnt that, Orville, it's just not going to fly. And for some things we found that it was reshaped by the circumstances and by exploring something. And other things changed which affected how it was that we were able to engage with that. And some of them are things that we still hold as important, but we didn't actually get to be able to address. All of that information was there in that review of that document. If you did, and I hope you did get a chance to be able to look at that, even if you don't have a copy at the moment, were there any questions or responses to that review of our past vision? Moving on then to the new parish vision. We dated it 2022. There was a group out of parish council which was formed to be able to continue to shape what had come out of the conversations that we have had together over the last 6 months. That there were several ways in which we looked at where it is that we believe God is calling us to move, including a time together with Bishop Cam up at St Mark's. And then a document was prepared which then has been further refined and worked through and prepared for this day by a small group from Parish Council. And I just want to thank again those from that group who contributed to that. what we've been looking at is the best way in which, as a church, we can fulfill God's expectations of us, looking into the years ahead, looking into the future. We determine that not only by looking at the past and what has shaped us up to this point, but also by looking around us at what the changes in society mean for us as a church community. And so we are looking to look forward. The invitation that is in that to focus on families with young children is not the only focus, but it is something which we've identified as a space within who we are and what we do. It's a space where it has been there in the past and has been responded to in a variety of different ways. One of the things this morning that it was great to see is one of the families who are here. It's a family who have been quite consistent from the middle of last year coming along to Sprouts. I've baptised both Kobe, who was determined to have a conversation with me down the front here, and his younger sister Winter, who was also here. The two of them have been coming regularly, brought by Rhiannon, but she texted me yesterday and said, "I'm thinking of coming to church. What time is it?" And when we knew that they were going to be here, thought, well, as I said, Mickey tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I want to have a word about that." So it was good to be able to do that, and we continue to encourage them, but it's not also just about getting people onto Sundays. It's about continuing to interact and to engage with them. Alongside that, there are lots of other different things that we do as community, looking at people in various other situations and stages of life. But it is an important part of what guides our reshaping of how and where and when we will gather as community. And what are the resources that we need to be able to do that in a way that will also respond to what we can see of those who have already indicated that they want to be part of it and to be part of that future together. There is a phrase that is there in that vision document, to be and be known as. And that's an important phrase that is there that ripples through once we start to sort of take some of the ideas that are up here down into who it is that we believe we're being called to be. That we will be who it is that we believe God is calling us to be, and that we will be known as a community that acts in particular ways, that provides resources for people in certain ways and age groups, and is engaged and interested and committed to certain values that we discern God is calling us to show in our lives. Like in accepting those 10 commitments and putting the red bench out there, that's one of the things, not just to be a place which is open and welcoming, but to be known as a place which is open and welcoming. So all the way through, there is that recognition that we need not only to follow a way that God is calling us into, but to let that be known in a variety of ways, that we are a community that is open and welcoming. There's a little pamphlet that I've been beginning to circulate around for talking about some of the things that we're already doing, and it starts with the line, "Children are welcome here." It's not always the case and not in every church community. And it may be said, but unless what flows on in how we act is consistent with that, then what you say and what you do, if they are inconsistent, then it's what we do and what we show that will actually speak to people. So to be and to be known as is an important part of that, the way in which those aspects of the vision have been teased out there. That in all we do, what we're actually seeking to do is to be sharing the invitation by God into relationship and sharing God's love in who we are and what we let ripple out from us into the community around us. There are, as I said, some more copies of the vision there if you didn't have one in front of you. I now invite responses to the vision document as it has been prepared. Responses or questions that might come out of that document. The first part of it quite clearly comes from the diocesan vision, and also those, it sort of starts from the broadest aspect of the rainbow and then focuses down again. Those aspects of mission and who it is that we're called to be as parts of the Anglican Church across the world. And those 5 marks of mission are something which is overarching around the world, those things which we hold as commitments. I hope that as you look through those 5 marks of mission, you'll recognise that my preaching, even sometimes when it may push some buttons, is actually driven by those. It comes from those marks of mission, a commitment to those and letting that flow through in the way in which the gospel is then explored and expressed. And then there are those aspects which come out of our diocesan vision, but then that always needs to be grounded. And so the second half is really about how we take those and ground them in who we are and who we are going to be. What are the things that strike you out of that document? It may not be necessarily a question or an objection, but it may be something that really strikes you out of that document that you might want to then share and affirm with others who are here. Anne, come around please, and we'll get the microphone's coming to you.
Well, this wasn't going to be a speech, but I'd like to respond. I think, our mission is in social justice within this community, within the people who will come here. Sorry, you want me to take the mask off? That whoever and whatever their circumstances, we have to walk alongside them. And it's not easy to do, but that's what God wants us to do and to be there. Sometimes it's lip service. We absolutely agree with what Paul is preaching, what he's talked about, but to enact it, to have social justice in this community, we need to be able to do that amongst the people we meet. And for many of us, that's really difficult, because as soon as you mention the word God, it may turn, but God is love, and everybody understands how significant love is. So I want to endorse those points that have been made, not so eloquently, but just for every individual. If we are with Christ, we won't be against him. We need to walk as he did. So I just wish to endorse those, Paul.
Anybody else who might like to make a comment or a response to the vision document? Stephen.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Hart from All Saints. I just wanted to endorse the vision. It's been the fruit of a significant labour for some time. Everyone's had a chance to comment on the vision and had a chance to have input to it. And I guess my view is we all need to swing in behind it. So assuming it gets through today, and I hope it does, everyone from all centres will have to swing in behind this vision, not just have a piece of paper saying there's our vision and ignore it. As you can see, All Saints has got some serious issues. I believe those exist across the whole parish, and unless we all join in together and see through this vision, we will all struggle. So I guess it's more of a comment, not on the content, but on the next period of time.
Any other responses or questions? John?
I was part of the small committee that put this vision draft together with the motions that are to follow. So I accept responsibility for what is before you. But in doing so, I certainly have some reservations. And like Stephen, I accept change, or the challenge of change, which this vision embodies. If we endorse this, we accept that we, looking back on our past, have to do things differently. And in drawing that to you, I highlight we will shape our life through these aspirational values, to be imaginative and creative, being intentional about reforming culture and traditions for God's world, to be courageous, to risk new things, and when necessary to make bold decisions, to be comprehensive, being welcoming and respectful of a broad range of ideas, people and approaches, and open to dialogue and learning. Things are going to be different if we accept and embrace this vision. We won't be doing the same things as we've been doing for the last 50 years. Certainly, as we're looking at the goals, to be known as a worshipping community, varied in time, style and focus. To be known a friendly, compassionate, inclusive, generous and open community. And in worshipping, to prepare to offer a range of styles and opportunities for worship, including in particular more contemporary and accessible patterns of worship, particularly open and engaging for children and young people. And this is carried forward into the motions, where on the motions paper it refers to the 10 a.m. service as this service may offer other styles of worship, so that those not nourished by traditional Anglican worship may find nurture and inspiration. So what we're doing is accepting that we will do things differently into the future. And in doing so, on the last part of this vision, the stewardship of our community, faithful stewardship, generous giving, engaged mission, responsible and balanced budgeting and use of available financial resources, responsible and careful maintenance of the physical resources entrusted to us, and ensuring that facilities are developed to enhance the mission of the church. So it's a big task we have before us, encompassed by this vision document. I endorse it to you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments, questions or responses? Margaret.
I always feel as though I always end up with this angle on things, but I just think it's really important. It's a really good document. It's got lots of wonderful things in it, and lots of things well worth pursuing wholeheartedly. Nevertheless, when I read it, I still feel as though it's looking at everything through our eyes. It's looking at us through our eyes. It's looking at the needs in society through our eyes. It's looking at how we think about the world. And I'm very, very aware that most of the people in our community don't live within our sphere of how we look at things. I think it's important to try sometimes to look with the eyes of an outside society, at what they see, how they think, the concepts they use to understand the world and life, and that we might have to let them express their understanding of life and the world as part of a dialogue between them and us. I just feel as though our document is still about us telling them good things, but probably not stepping into their shoes and seeing how the world looks from their point of view, and then speaking to them in their own terms so that what we say has more chance of being meaningful to them. We're used to living in our thought world and we've got to be aware it's not the thought world of a lot of people. So we have to remember that. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Margaret. That's an important point to make as we look at how it is that this unfolds. Any other questions, comments or responses?
This might sound a little boastful, but I was the Australian member of the International Commission on Mission more than 30 years ago that developed the 5 marks of mission. So it's quite fascinating to be more than 30 years later to be sitting in a group where in fact we're working on, we spent about 8 years working on all those years ago. It's quite fascinating to me.
30 years later, we're still working on some things. 2,000 years later, we're still working on some things. Can I have a mover then for the motion that we as a parish community embrace and endorse the 2022 vision and commit ourselves each to engage with this shared vision individually and together in community? Thank you, Anne Merson. Seconder? It was Megan Twine. Thank you, Megan and Anne. Any discussion of that motion? It is, as several of those who have spoken said, a commitment that we make together to continue to see how we as a parish community, as well as each individually, take on board and live out the things that are there. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And as far as I could see, there wasn't any hand that came up to vote against that motion. And one of the things that I'd say is that it was carried, as they put in meeting procedure, without dissenting voice. And that's important, that that's something which embodies our approach as community to that as a motion. The next motion is that the usual pattern of Sunday worship for our parish community be revised from the beginning of May 2022 to provide the following: at St Luke's, 8 a.m. Sunday Eucharist, 10 a.m. family service, 5 p.m. reflective service, and at St Mark's, 10 a.m. service. I will move that from the chair, taking responsibility for that as a direction. Is there a seconder for that motion? Viv? Seconded? There were a number of people whose hands went up. I moved and Viv seconded. Our current pattern of worship is that essentially I do go and do the same thing 3 times on a Sunday. That is as it has been for a while, and even when there were more clergy, it still tended to be, on the whole, apart from times when there was evensong here, but that it was essentially the same thing that was being done in different places, sometimes at different times, because there has been some tweaking over the years of the times of those services, but it was still essentially the same thing that was being done in 3 different places. As several people have said, and picking up as well on what Margaret was saying, Margaret Compton was saying, that the community around us is less and less accustomed to the way that we do the usual things that we do. And if we're wanting to be able to connect with the message that has been entrusted to us, then we need also to find other ways of being able to make that connection, both within church buildings and the church context, as well as outside of that. So the invitation is to look at a different pattern, which will give us an opportunity to be able to then connect in some different ways with people. As John pointed out, the invitation is for that 10 o'clock service for it to be something which will be more open to people who are not really accustomed to the pattern of liturgy as we usually have it in the church. And to be able to have the space to do that, we need to be able to open up some spaces otherwise in what we do. One of the reasons for that being here, there are a number of reasons for that being here. It's both because we have, over the last 18 months, chosen to make this a much more technology-rich environment, which is one of the things that it makes it easier to be able to do some of that sort of thing. It's also more centrally placed because we know that from the interest that we already know is there and those people and resources that we're likely to draw on, a central location is going to be far more accessible than somewhere else. And a larger space which has a bit more flexibility. John, I hope I can say this at the Parish Council on Wednesday, John was even throwing out what might to some people have been a more challenging thing, that some of those items of seating on which you are sitting at the moment may possibly be moved, even if it is for that service and then moved back afterwards. But that to be able to have a space in which we could be more flexible in how it is that we gather, what we do, using a technology-rich environment, and to have a way of doing that which will then be able to make that invitation in a way that we're not doing at the moment. A number of those words that I used in the sermon today, you may have thought were shaped just to try to make an argument for this meeting. I actually picked up some of that from something that I used when I was the rector of St Cuthbert's in a previous place. So I admit that I took some of the substance, actually a fair bit of the substance of the sermon today, because when I plucked it out and looked at it, I thought, oh, that actually sort of fits to where we are at the moment. Cuthbert engaging with change, not necessarily agreeing with everything, but deciding for the benefit of the kingdom of God and to be faithful, that he needed to then not just embrace but also to be part of a change that was being undertaken. So I think maybe those words from the past were speaking to me as much as to anybody. It is a significant change, and as you can see in the explanatory notes, while the 8 o'clock service here would remain basically as it is, it's also an invitation still to think about what it is that we do and how it is that we engage. That challenge to be more welcoming and aware of people who are here. I have noticed over the last little while that many of those who have come new into the congregation here have actually been being actively welcomed. In the nearly 5 years since I've been here, that hasn't always been the case. And I have noticed that there have been times when people who were quite clearly newcomers have ended up standing alone, and people in their huddles were talking to each other. Whether it's in a continuing service or at other times as well, active welcoming and engagement with an invitation to the people who are new among us needs to be something that we are aware of. Thinking about how it is that we make that invitation out into the community, not only to the other and different ways that we are offering, but there are lots of people who come because they like what we do and the way that we gather and the music and that pattern of worship that is there. I did have somebody say to me, oh, does that mean the organ's going? No. And you can breathe a sigh of relief there, Peter, because that and what we usually do here on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock is something which is life-giving and engaging for many people, but not for everybody, and not for lots who are around us. And so different patterns of music, different styles of worship, different ways of engaging actually increases our opportunity to be able to share the life that God has placed in us with those who are around us in community. So that motion there's there about a changed pattern of worship, but underlying that is all that lies there in the vision about how we engage with community, both gathered and around us. It's one of the consequences that flows from pursuing that line of the vision as we have it. I expect this time when I ask, are there any comments or questions, that there won't be the prolonged silence that there was when I asked some of the others. Maybe this is the moment you're waiting for. Is there anything that anybody would like to say in response to that? Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm only new to this church myself, and I'm very grateful for Peter and Viv for welcoming me, being open. So, yeah, I'm glad that I walked past and came in. It was very open, it was welcoming. I love this place, and I'm happy to keep coming. Thank you.
Other responses? Marion.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I've been coming here for about 30 or 40 years, and I have always found it a very welcoming place. People spoke to me, and with our morning tea, we do make an effort and have done for years to speak to people as they come up for a cup of tea. And standing where we do, we can see people who are not talking to others. So normally one of us will make an effort to go across and speak to them and bring them up to another group. I've not heard anybody in all those years say that they felt they were unwelcoming. I think having the morning tea now again at the back of the church has brought a greater sense of community here. But one of the things that may have contributed to that is the fact that at the moment you very often have to rush off to St Mark's, so there's no real time for people to talk to you, which is understandable, and obviously this is probably going to change. But I can assure you that the rest of the congregation, as far as I can see, are open and welcoming and have been for all the years I've been coming here.
I added that comment just as one of the different aspects of who it is that we're being called to be. There are lots of different ways in which we're called to live out that invitation, both to those who come and to those who are not yet here. Other responses, questions, comments?
I may not look like Dr. John Stanley, but I am speaking on his behalf. He apologises for being at Wynnum to listen to his niece playing with the Brisbane Symphony Band. So may I, Paul, it's that long, it's only half a page. May I read it?
I feel caught at the moment in a point of only now being told that there was this statement. I'd like you to bring it down to one or two paragraphs out of what he has to say. Do you need time to think through what it is are the key points that he makes, and somebody else to speak?
Them.
Okay.
I have them.
Just the key points that he wants to make.
Yep. Because as a recommendation, so it's endorsing the 4 motions, but our rector take the 10 a.m. service at St Mark's twice a month, reminding the congregation that they're important, because he felt that the motions that were put forward may make the members of the congregation at All Saints and St Mark's feeling less cherished. As far as the 5 p.m. reflective service at St Luke's, presuming that's once a month, and he said, I wish to be mindful, we should be mindful that the rector has commitments at Fairholme College and Toowoomba Grammar late on some Sundays. And a review, the last part, a comprehensive review of the 3 centres and how they should be used, that these will be considered over the next 12 months and decided at the next AGM next year.
Thank you, Anne. On behalf of Dr. John, John had raised some of those matters those questions at the parish council. The intention is that the 5 p.m. is every week, and that means that for 2 of the Sundays each term, one where I go to Toowoomba Grammar and one where I've been I will go to Fairholme, that will be something that follows on after that time. So, well, that's what I've been doing anyway when I've been going to All Saints. It's a good thing to do. That was the Fairholme service, the first of which I did 2 weeks ago. Was the largest service of the day. I had 170 boarders. That was fun. We had some fun together as we talked about a few different things, and there were some of them who were wonderfully engaged, and some of whom who would have wanted to be anywhere else, and a mix of everybody in between. So yes, it was an interesting experience. I've done that once, and we'll do it. I'll actually do it 5 times. So one of the terms I'm going twice, but it will be once or twice a term. And yes, going to Toowoomba Grammar, usually it's on both of them are about 6:45, so that they've had their dinner and then they come across. And so there's time to be able to do that still. It's an important part of that ministry, and if anybody else wants to come and join in and be there, then you're always welcome to do that as well. The headmaster of Toowoomba Grammar has also invited me to have a conversation about whether or not I go to do some things for the whole school community, as well as just for a small group of boarders. So building up relationships, things that sometimes take time to be able to settle into a pattern. And I also, as I've been speaking about the possibility of the new family service at 10 o'clock, the new head at Toowoomba and his family are enthusiastic. We will see what happens, but at least they are a family who have said that they were very interested in that, and that time too in particular. Other questions, comments or responses to that motion about changing our patterns of services? John.
As I said, I was part of the small group that put these motions together and now are before you. The reservations I have in supporting these motions refers to as Paul said, the underlying implications of the change of the service times as reflected in motion 2 and 4. I'd like to hear from the people of All Saints whether they really want us to adopt motion 4 that requires us to have a 12-month review of the ministry and use of the All Saints site to bring it back to the 2023 annual meeting for a further decision. The question I have is the timing. The procedure for temporary and permanent disposal, temporary closure and permanent closure of a church, I set out in the diocesan handbook, are extensive and long, certainly long duration. It doesn't happen quickly. I'd just like to hear from perhaps Stephen and All Saints community as to whether they really want us to follow motion 4 and retain All Saints for another 12 months in limbo until we come to a decision to actually what we do with All Saints in particular, but also reading that through into a review of the use and facilities at St Luke's and All Saints. I'd just like to hear some comment, further comment from All Saints before we proceed.
Thank you, John. Just to add to that, I wouldn't think that motion 4 necessarily locks us into 12 months as the time by which we are able to make a decision. If we come to some clarity about All Saints, for example, then we could actually have a report that's prepared for then a special meeting. I think even though it talks about the 12 months, it doesn't lock us into that as the earliest point at which we could discuss. But I think that's a good question to be asking. because it really does come into this motion as well, because you notice that there is no provision for a continuing service at All Saints. So it's good to be able to hear from the people of All Saints, as well as then also from the people of St Mark's, because there is a change that's included in there. Stephen, looks like you're it at the moment.
Thank you. I thought there were some other people from All Saints here, actually. They must have had to go. But yes, we are. The congregation of All Saints is obviously very upset and sad about having to face this reality. We believe it is a bit of a reality that it has been a long time in coming. My understanding of the motion is that it's more in line with Rector's John. I think my understanding was that the temporary closure is temporary, but it is one step in a process. I don't believe the congregation of All Saints wants to frustrate the process or delay it, but I would like it to be part of the review so that we go into any further process with our eyes open as to what the implications are. I've said before in this forum and at Parish Council, my concern is for the whole parish, not just for All Saints. And I think that review really needs to cut down into things, into the detail. For example, what is the revenue streams and the cost streams of each of our centres, so that we can get a real understanding. I mean, again, I've said this before, and my fear is in 10 years' time, when some of us will be in heaven, there'll be fewer people here, and unless we all embrace the vision and build the demographic base of this church, we're going to be in real trouble. And I would hate to think that in 10 years' time we'll be looking around and thinking, we can no longer sustain this beautiful building. Where can we go as a parish? If only we had a nice little place in Arthur Street, East Toowoomba. You know, so that is my genuine fear. That this is a fabulous building. You know, I was baptised here, and that's how long my connection goes to St Luke's. And I do worry about it as well as All Saints and St Mark's, of course. But I think we do need the people of All Saints. I think are pragmatic and realistic. This has been a long time coming, and it's sad, but. So I'm probably diverging off John's question, which is, how do we feel about, I don't believe we want to defer this and prolong the agony in a way, but we probably want a genuine review of these things, but do not want to frustrate the process and have a hangover to the next AGM, if that makes sense.
Just to reiterate some of what Stephen was saying, and I think he could probably give any more feedback if he wanted to, but from speaking with the people at All Saints, that it is my impression that most of them really do support this direction, and in fact that motion to cease services at All Saints came from a centre meeting at All Saints as part of their recognition that we needed to do some things differently in our parish community, and with all of the grief that goes with that as well. But it was a recognition from the people there that we needed to do something that would be changing directions. Any other comments or responses to the motion that is before us? Jeff.
St Mark's is an integral part of the parish. The fact that so many of our parishioners who are active here in this parish, not only at St Mark's, which is a different facility, but they come here to worship, they come here to work for the good of everything that you see in this document. Now, I do believe, though, that as Stephen has said, we do need to have an honest and open discussion about just where this parish is going. Yes, we have facilities which need maintenance, we have facilities that need use, and we are trying very hard to increase the return on those facilities. They have a debt in terms of making sure the facility is maintained. But please keep in mind that it is one parish, and yes, we do have to maintain the health of this parish. We are all in it, as they say, together. So please keep in mind that we, as a parish, can go forward. We can go forward whether we're using 1, 2, 3 facilities or even more. There are many people who still happily meet in their own homes. And that, I think, is an integral part of being a Christian. So please, this is our parish.
Are there any other questions, responses, or comments to that motion about the change in service arrangements? We have a mover and seconder, so I will put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried again as far as I could see without dissenting voice. Thank you. The third motion is that an appeal be established to seek funds from the wider community to preserve the National Trust listed assets at St Luke's site. And thank you, yes, Jeff and Sandy had let me know that there's an 80th birthday party that actually started half an hour ago. So thank you for staying and contributing, particularly then. That motion about establishing an appeal, the purpose is to be able to go to the wider community and to say, here is something which is regarded as a building which is important within Toowoomba. It's regarded as a landmark, and St Luke's appears when you get the list of what to see and do in Toowoomba, this building is on it. Because people come to see a significant building which was begun over 120 years ago, 125 years ago for this building, and was preceded by another building on this site 40 years before that. It's recognised as being a place of interest and significance. It's also a place that is valued, and many people within our community have connections here. The number of people who, when we last year in the Carnival of Flowers, came and said, when we had the wedding display around, oh yes, I was married here, or my grandmother, or my great-grandmother. Sometimes we then say, give us the details, and do you have a photo? But there are people who draw connections here in the wider community. We have realised, as we have been exploring how best to care for this building, that its needs are beyond us. It may or may not be obvious, but there is about $500,000 that's been ploughed into just the fabric of this building in the last few years. And you can't actually see it because it happens in ways that then you see that the wall is there and the water's not flowing in, so you see it by what's not there. Well, the wall hasn't fallen down, or the cracks are gone so you don't notice them, or things are not anymore falling onto our head when we stand at the line there near the baptistry, or when there is rain you don't have it flowing into the building. The scaffolding up there will be coming down during this next week, and the restored wall there will be beautiful. But this building has lots of ongoing needs, and it is beyond our capacity to be able to care for them, particularly for the sorts of things that, as Stephen and others were saying, to be able to continue and grow and have a healthy life as a church community, we need to be able to do other things than to be just raising money for maintenance. We need to be paying attention to our life as community and how it is that we are focused of being a church community in the place where God has put us. And so the suggestion is that we go to the community around and make clear that here is somewhere that is important to us and important to you, and we need your help to be able to maintain it. Suggestion is that we might find somebody prominent in the community who then will have hopefully some networks to be able to help us to discover what's out there. I mean, how valued is this building in the community, to be able to hold it together. We will have a bit of a battle with that, because there are things that we will want to spend money on which are part of growth and focus on mission and our life as a church community. as well as the things that need to be done for maintenance. So for some there may seem to be, well, you're spending that money on that and then you tell us you need money for the building. Well, that's because our life is not just in maintaining a building, but it is other things as well. So the sharing of that information will be important of how we go about our life. Are there any questions or comments or responses to that suggestion that we establish an appeal to be able to preserve the National Trust assets? And there are 3, as you know from the sign out the front there, 3 listed National Trust assets. One is the hall next door, this building overall, and particularly the organ, which is listed as a separate asset. So those 3 things are the listed assets. And the organ looks great, but we have a report that says that within a few years, to be able to keep it functioning, we'll need to spend about $60,000 on it. So that's one of those things that is there on that list. It may sound like it's easy, but what it takes when you're sitting at that console, Peter, to be able to keep it all functioning and keep it all going as it is sometimes a bit of a challenge when there are things that happen and the tweaks and bumps that you have to avoid. Are there any questions or comments about that motion that we seek to establish that appeal? Can I have a mover for that motion? Thank you, John and Peter. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. The third is something that's been referred to a couple of times already, the fourth motion rather, that a comprehensive review be conducted during this year into the use of each of the 3 centres of the parish, and that a report be prepared for consideration at the 2023 annual meeting. Can I have a mover for that motion? Thank you, Margaret Compton, a seconder, and Alan Rennick seconding. The idea, as has been said, is that we do a comprehensive review. It may be that that we come to a point where there is clarity about potential use or not of continuing use for one of the centres, and that we have a special meeting at which we begin the process of changing that use and perhaps releasing the assets that it contains for use within the wider parish. But that we thought that it was important to undertake that sort of review, and coming again to what Stephen said, it needs to be something that we look quite deeply and carefully at what's happening in each of the centres. As Jeff probably would have said had he still been able to be here, we have held off on some things at St Mark's to be part of that review, because we need to be clear about what the continuing use and context will be for ministry there, to know whether or not it's worth spending money on certain things that are there that are beginning to need money spent. So it's both about how we, the life of the community in the buildings, as well as the buildings themselves, and those places and those contexts within the wider community. So a comprehensive review for each place. It's been moved and seconded. Is there anybody who wanted to ask a question or to make a comment and a response to that motion? Yes.
Hello, I'm a visitor, but you did say earlier that we could attend and ask a question. So Richard and I have been members of the parish many decades ago and attended St Luke's as well as All Saints. My question is really just for clarification. What factors will you take into account, will the parish council take into account in the comprehensive review? What is meant by comprehensive review? Thank you.
As I was, I thought I'd outline that it includes both what is the life of the people who are the community that meet in that place at present, that what are the needs of that particular building as well, that are there things that would require further development or investment in that building for it to be able to be continued to be used in a particular way, to look at potential other uses of that building, whether it was retained or whether or not the best way of being able to use the assets which are there within that building is to release those to be able to use in other places. As we do that, I'm sure that there will be other things that we look at, but it's looking at the life of the community there as a church community, at the building and property itself, its place within the surrounding community, potential alternate uses should that be some part of that we're considering, and then what path to be able to follow looking forward, choosing to invest in maintaining and developing that particular building, to release the assets, and also what particular things might be there for each of the communities that might already be part of our vision or might then grow out of thinking about who it is that we're being called to be. That takes into account some of the things that Margaret was saying as well about the perspective of the community around, looking in to say, what do they see of the church and what it is that we have to be able to share with them. It will be something dynamic, organic, that will grow, but that's the starting point for that review. Any other questions, comments or responses? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you all for coming and being here, and thank you for those who have contributed in lots of different ways. And one of the things that it is really important about church communities is that it's open to both people who have been with us a short time as well as those who have been part of a community for a longer time, that we are a community together, and sometimes there will be a fresh perspective that we get from somebody who sees with different eyes, and that's a good thing. Please, sorry, Stephen?
Thanks. I've got a motion arising from the passage of those four motions. As Centre Warden at All Saints, I've got certain responsibilities for maintenance and cleaning and so forth at All Saints. I'm concerned in the passage going after Easter, following a temporary closure, about the ongoing maintenance and cleaning there. I'm conscious that the budget has allowed for that to take place over the next 12 months. One thing I am concerned about is the ongoing use of the hall and the church by other congregations. There is some revenue stream to be had for use of both the hall and the church, which of course is important in our current environment, and I'm comfortable with the hall being used for that purpose over the next 12 months. I am concerned about the future use of the centre itself, the church itself, by other congregations from other denominations, and I would like to move a motion. The basis of my concern relates to general cleaning, COVID cleaning, the risk of damage, and those sorts of things. So I would like to move a motion that the All Saints Church no longer be available for use by other denominations during the period of its temporary closure. So this is arising out of the other motions, that's why it has not been
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, Stephen had foreshadowed that, and through Parish Council that he would be moving that sort of motion, so I'd forgotten about that. Is there a seconder for Stephen's motion? Thank you, Catherine. Any discussion of that motion? Anne?
Could I'm asking the question why, so I guess is that discussion. Why would other congregations, such as the Greek Orthodox group, coming to All Saints to worship if there were some conditions governing their use of the church?
At the moment, there have been a number of different congregations who have been using the church building. We have unfortunately had difficulties with, not all of them, but I'd probably even say most of them, where they had, particularly during COVID, were not really observing the COVID conditions, where there have been difficulties about how the space had been used and how clean it had been kept. And it's an added stressor to sort of try to work out, especially if we're not using it, what's happening in the space. And so that's part of it. And so it was to draw a line of clarity that there are other spaces that people do have available to be able to use, those who had been using the space there at All Saints. And so it's not that they're completely bereft, but it allows some clarity as we're working out what to do. Is that fair?
That's basically it, and there's only one group using it at the moment. The Russian Orthodox Church have used it. They were temporarily suspended because of COVID-related matters. Happy to refer any inquiries from other congregations onto other centres, perhaps even St Mark's, or something like that. But given that we're not using the church, in order to protect it and preserve it, I'd like to sort of keep it in a fit state. We have had problems in the past with breakages and even things that I don't actually endorse, like moving the altar around within the church, which creates safety issues. There is a risk of damage as well. And in this pandemic environment, it would involve having to ensure someone's doing a COVID clean after every service from another church, which hasn't historically been done. So that's why I moved the motion.
Any other questions, comments or responses? Yes.
Oh, just Brenda Shetler from St Mark's. I just wonder, it's really a point of order, can we accept a motion which hasn't been sort of generally circulated? I think Stephen's spoken very forcefully in a certain amount, but I don't think people have had the opportunity to perhaps consider this. It's quite a serious matter. It's just a point of order on whether this motion can be accepted at this meeting.
Thank you. According to the I always call them statutes because that's what we'll call them in another diocese. Yes, motions are able to be accepted from the floor of a meeting such as this. And while I understand, yes, that for others that had been something which was unknown as a motion, it's something that Parish Council had been made aware of, and so. Yes, that was, in a sense, my oversight in not having added that specifically to the agenda. I suppose another aspect of that is that this is giving an opportunity for some wider feedback about that motion. I think that it probably has support within Parish Council, and really that sort of matter is Parish Councils to decide, but this was an opportunity to be able to hear some other responses that might have been here within the community. Unfortunately, just to add one other thing about that briefly, I've been given that the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow has been enthusiastically expressing his support for the war in Ukraine and the support for Vladimir Putin. I did contact the person responsible for the Russian Orthodox congregation here in Toowoomba and ask where they stood. He was prepared to say that they were praying about it, but was not prepared to voice any sort of criticism or opposition to the war or to the actions of the patriarch. Even if it had not been on the basis of what Stephen was suggesting, on that basis I would have been suggesting that until or unless they're prepared to make that sort of statement, that their use of our facility would have been curtailed. It's unfortunate, but I think it's we need to be united in recognising the evil that has been unfolding there. And you may have noticed that there is the section set up in the Warriors Chapel with the colours of the flag of Ukraine, the two candles which are there recognising the colours of the flag, and the sunflowers which are the national flower of Ukraine, and where each time we gather we pray for peace. There was Catherine.
Hi, thanks Paul. Can I just clarify your point earlier that the actual decision as to whether All Saints remains open for other denominations rests with Parish Council?
Sorry. That as a decision could rest with Parish Council, but it's also appropriate for it to be carried through at a parish meeting. So if this meeting supported that, then we have a Parish Council meeting between now and when that would be enacted, and I would be asking for Parish Council to endorse that decision.
And I'd just add to people who aren't aware of All Saints that it's not just the moving of the altar or other issues. We've come there on a Sunday for service. Last week, windows had been left open. Now, if we'd had heavy rain, that would have caused substantial damage to our church. We've gone there and Stephen's been mopping up spilt soft drink off the floor half an hour before the service. So if we're not regularly there, if we're not there every Sunday, as we are, to check on the inside of the church, to clean the soft drink up, to make sure that items that have been donated by families of this parish over a 100-year period are being looked after and cleaned, then that is what is driving this motion, out of respect for the church and for those that have been there before us.
Any other comments, Christian? Anne?
Just wanted to clarify, will All Saints still be available for weddings and funerals though?
Yes, according to the guidelines which are in the diocesan guidelines, that temporary closure does not prevent it being available for weddings and funerals. So if it's not being used regularly from that point, if we have that sort of event, then there would need to be an additional fee that people would pay to be able to ensure that it is cleaned properly before and after for that sort of specific event, and that's something they need to take into account in choosing to use that venue. Any other questions? Marion?
Jog down to you, Mary.
Thank you. I've listened with interest to the discussion about All Saints, and one thing has occurred to me, and probably to others. It is a very valuable piece of land there. It's one of the last, or it is probably the last big block there in that very highly desirable area. Beautiful trees and so on. And I wonder, are we wise to dispose of such a valuable piece of land? If you remember, Henry Ford said to his son, "Buy land, my boy, they're not making any more of it." So whether we should hang on to that particular piece of valuable land, I don't know, but I should imagine I would hate to see it go and find that people have put townhouses and whatnot on it. But
one of the things that comes into that that previous motion was about a comprehensive review, and part of that is to look at what on balance is the best way to use that asset. Should it be redeveloped ourselves? Should it be retained and find some use for it? Or is it better in the long term to release the assets from there and then to use those assets in other ways for the life and mission of the church? I'll put that motion which had been moved about that specific use of All Saints. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And we will refer that to Parish Council, but taking into account the view of this special meeting. Please stand and we'll say the grace together. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Members of Parish Council, could you please just come here for briefly, very briefly, up the front.